IBO World Champion, La Bella Bestia, coming to you to show my appreciation for the ring IQ. So if you haven't already,
get guard, but
wow,
Howard,
look at the strength.
follow and subscribe Ring IQ and check out the relay where they cover today's top boxing news.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, the Teofimo Lopez versus George Kambosos undercard is all set to go on November the 27th, later on this month. And there have been some developments. Matchroom alum Ramla Ali is going to be returning to action. Ramla aspired to achieve Olympic gold.
Achieve Olympic gold in the last Olympics.
Ramla, like some other professional boxers, some far more experienced than she is as a professional, aspired to achieve amateur success, amateur gold, on the biggest stage for an amateur boxer, the Olympics. Unfortunately, that didn't work out for Ramla any more than it worked out for Maiva, any more than it worked out for Christina Hemmer. So now,
Or Delphine Passoon.
Ramla has returned to the pro ranks. She's going to attempt to advance to a professional record of 4 wins and no losses against an opponent that has yet to be announced. Another development that caught my eye is amateur standout Christina Cruz. She's going to be returning to action, attempting to advance to a professional record of 2 wins and no losses against Mariguen Villanenga Hins.
That's a mouthful.
Christina made her pro debut a few months ago, back in August, on the undercard of The Locks versus Dipset, a card that took place on Triller. On that card, you saw former champion Chris Algieri, you saw heavyweight contender Michael Hunter, and you saw Christina Cruz making her pro debut. She's going to be fighting on a Matchroom DAZN card now.
And what is a flyweight contest?
Flyweight, that's where Japan's own Naoko Fujioka holds the WBA, America's own Marlena Esparza holds the WBC, Argentinia's own Leonela Paola Judica holds the IBF, and Argentinia's own Anaí Lopez holds the WBO.
Deborah Anaí Lopez.
And for Christina Cruz, time is of the essence, because Christina Cruz, in spite of having debuted as a professional this year, she ain't got all the time in the world. She's a seasoned amateur, an amateur standout, shows a lot of promise, but she's no spring chicken. She's 38 years old.
None of us are getting any younger.
And neither is she. She's in a densely populated weight class that has 4 active reigning world champions, 4 world titles split between them, and it's not too late to make something happen. I mean, it really isn't. It's entirely possible that at some point next year or the year after that, Christina could see herself fighting one of those champions for one of those world titles. But she's got to have a busier 2022 than 2021 was. I mean, I think at minimum, Christina needs to get
4 to 5 fights in next year.
be ready to challenge for a world title at some point. That is, if that's what Christina aspires to do. She's working on a clock.
Aren't we all?
And it is customary for a fighter in the earlier stages of their career to be a lot more busier than they are in the advanced stages of their career. Thus, it would be normal for Christina to get in 3, 4, maybe even 5 fights in next year to garner professional experience and transition from the amateurs, an amateur style, to a more pro style.
And I think she can do it.
She's just got to get busy. This will be her second fight in the year of 2021, her second fight as a professional boxer overall. I expect that next year Christina might be even more active, even more busy than she has been this year, and it's a necessary evil.
She's definitely one to watch out for.
The flyweight division, as it were, is a talent-rich division that has no shortage of promising fighters and world champions. Christina Cruz could be one among them. We'll see how that plays out, and she's going to be fighting on the undercard of Lopez versus Kambosos. Unbeaten Chinese heavyweight Zhilei Zhang is going to be making an appearance on this card. He was last in action on the undercard of Canelo Alvarez versus Avni Yildirim out there in Florida.
He drew with Jerry Forrest.
Zhilei Zhang sports a professional record of 22 wins, no losses, 1 draw with 17 knockouts. He, like Christina Cruz, he's no spring chicken either. This guy's 38 years old is what he is. And I hate to be an old cynic, I hate to be an old skeptic, but looking at how Zhilei Zhang performed against Jerry Forrest, who really isn't a world-level guy, he's not a world-class fighter, he's not that kind of contender. Zhilei Zhang languished with that fighter, is what he did. Fight was scored a draw. And these are the kind of guys to where if you're a world beater, you're going to plow through these kind of guys. But Zhilei Zhang didn't plow through Jerry Forrest.
So I have serious reservations about how far he can go.
I mean, he can win a couple of fights. He's been winning a couple of fights, beat a couple of guys, but as far as world title contention, aspirations of becoming China's heavyweight champion in this era, I just don't see that happening. The heavyweight division is a talent-rich division with no shortage of dangerous fights, dangerous fighters for a guy like Zhilei Zhang, who, while he's unbeaten now...
That can change.
And for a 38-year-old heavyweight that's got roughly 23 professional contests under his belt, having not yet faced a world-class fighter, time is of the essence.
I don't want to be Debbie Downer.
I don't want to be a party pooper, but if you want to know what I think, and you're here, so I'll assume that you do, it's not very likely that Zhilei Zhang sees himself become a world champion with any of the alphabets.
I mean, I wouldn't bet on it.
Azinga Fuzili is going to be taking on Kenichi Ogawa for what is the vacant IBF Super Featherweight title. Super Featherweight, that's 130 pounds. That's where Shakur Stevenson holds the WBO.
Oscar Valdez holds the WBC.
And Venezuela's own Roger Gutierrez holds the WBA title, which he will be defending very soon against America's own Chris Colbert. This fight is a significant fight with two seemingly insignificant fighters, insignificant to some, because when you think of 130 pounds, you don't necessarily think of Azinga Fuzili or Kenichi Ogawa. These aren't the big names, as it were, the familiar ones. The familiar ones are Jamel Herring, Shakur Stevenson, Oscar Valdez, Chris Colbert. You don't necessarily think of these two guys, but after
this fight,
the winner will ascend and take center stage in that Shakur Stevenson, Oscar Valdez, Roger Gutierrez conversation. They will effectively become one of the major players at 130 pounds. So while you might not be familiar with either one of these two guys right now, you want to get familiar with them moving forward, because the winner of the fight will be this division's IBF champion. Overall, a solid card. Now that Matchroom's got the rights to it, value for money, if I do say so myself, because don't forget, Trello wanted to charge me and you something like, what, $60 for Lopez versus Kambosos?
now we get to see it at no additional charge as part of our DAZN subscription.
That and the Devin Haney versus Joseph Diaz WBC lightweight title fight set to go down next month for all those out there that were thinking of canceling their DAZN subscriptions because there wasn't enough American-based content.
Well, there you have it. 2 more cards before the end of the year.
Not including whatever Golden Boy's doing. In other news, revisiting a story we talked about in my previous video, per tweet from Michael Benson, John Fury on Tyson Fury, that's Big John Fury, Tyson's dad, he said he'll have a good hard-earned rest now, and what he wants to do is up to him. I said retire. He's won everything. He's got no more to prove. He's got millions in the bank, secure for life. He's his own man. He'll do what he wants to do. And in reading these comments, like I said before, I get the sense that what Big John Fury wants is for Tyson Fury to make out like a bandit. Make out like a bandit on the eve of an order from the WBC for him to defend his WBC title against Dillian Whyte, leaving that unfinished business behind, not just with Dillian, but with the winner of Joshua versus Usyk. I want to make this clear, crystal clear. Tyson Fury is at liberty to do whatever he wants, for whatever reason he wants to do it. None of us can stop him. And he has had a very successful career, if you think about it. He's made himself a lot of money, enough money that he can retire quite comfortably. Perhaps not as much as he would have made had the Joshua fight happened and gotten over the line. I'll go as far as saying that he would have made more in that one Joshua fight than what he's made in those 3 Wilder fights.
But he can retire.
Though if he does, I hate to break the news to you guys, but I won't view Tyson Fury through the same scope, the same lens. Think of him as being in the same realm as a Lennox Lewis,
I won't.
a Mike Tyson,
I won't.
a Larry Holmes, a Muhammad Ali before
He
him.
can retire if he wants.
But what I'm addressing here is the notion that somehow Tyson Fury has effectively established himself as this era's premier heavyweight, having not faced most of what was out there. In this era, he's only really fought Deontay Wilder.
That's the only one of his contemporaries that he fought.
Deontay Wilder, who only faced one of his contemporaries throughout his decade-long career, over 40 fights, and all he's got to show for it is Bermane Stiverne and Luis Ortiz.
Luis Ortiz didn't face the vast majority of you guys either.
I mean, do you see what I'm telling you? Do you see what I'm getting at? That the act of beating Deontay Wilder 3 times does not install Tyson Fury as this era's premier heavyweight because neither he or Deontay Wilder have faced most of this era's heavyweights. Wilder's biggest claim to fame is Luis Ortiz, but Luis Ortiz didn't face the vast majority of guys that were out there. So how does beating Wilder...
If Tyson Fury retires, it leaves a huge question mark.
I'm not hung up on Big John Fury's anecdotes on what would happen if Tyson Fury fought Alexander Usyk or Anthony Joshua or Dillian Whyte or any of the up-and-comers that are coming through out there. I'm not hung up on Big John Fury's anecdotes because he is so obviously partial, so obviously biased. What he wants his son to do is take the money he's made, retire, and sail into the sunset. Make off like a bandit. Though if you want your son to be thought of in that Muhammad Ali, that Larry Holmes, Joe Louis, Lennox Lewis...
Tyson Fury can retire if he wants.
I can't stress that enough. Though if he does, I myself won't view him in the same realm, as being in the same realm, through the same scope, the same lens, as those aforementioned all-time great heavyweights, because their exploits were not limited to just 1 or 2 signature victories, 1 or 2 credible scalps. Lennox Lewis fought anyone from Mike Tyson to Evander Holyfield to Frank Bruno to Oliver McCall to Hasim Rahman to Ray Mercer to Vitaly Klitschko.
He didn't just fight 2 guys and crown himself the king.
It took a lot more effort than that from Lennox Lewis to be thought of in that spectrum, that scope. The same applies to Larry Holmes. The same applies to Muhammad Ali. The same applied to Joe Louis before him.
You don't fucking fight Wilder 3 times, then act like you cleaned out the weight class.
Connoisseurs of boxing already know that boxing math, it doesn't work like that. You beat Wilder, but Wilder never beat Dillian Whyte. Wilder never beat Anthony Joshua. Wilder never beat Andy Ruiz, at least not yet. He hasn't fought Alexander Usyk, so beating Wilder does not equate to beating them. And there still are those guys to deal with.
You know, and there'll always be somebody, won't they? Like I said to him the other day, there's always going to be a Usyk, and after him there'll be somebody else and somebody else. You can't go on forever with it all, you know. And he's beat the best man of his era 3 times in a row. He's fought the most dangerous man on the planet 3 times and beat him 3 times.
Understand that this is what I'm addressing. This veiled attempt to blow smoke up everybody's ass about Deontay Wilder when we all know that Deontay Wilder didn't face the vast majority of heavyweights that were out there.
But now he's the most dangerous guy.
Wilder was the man to beat. The man who didn't face the vast majority of his contemporaries. The man who never unified a title in spite of having gone pro.
Went pro in 2008.
It's over 10 years ago, and all he's done is beat Bermane Stiverne for the WBC title and Luis Ortiz.
None of them men will even fight Wilder. Usyk won't fight Wilder, too dangerous. Joshua will definitely not go down that road. You know, Dillian Whyte's pulled out from Otto Wallin. You know why? Listen to what I said. He's thought, hang on a minute, John knows his stuff. I'm not fighting Wallin. I'm going to get turned over probably. I won't get my title shot then. You know, it takes them to listen to my videos, and he thinks to himself, because it's all on.
Do you hear this guy? Do you hear Big John Fury trying to revise history? It's a well-known matter of fact, well-documented, that before your son even got that title shot that he didn't earn, that he didn't deserve, it was Anthony Joshua pursuing Wilder. The same Anthony Joshua that you say didn't want no parts of Wilder. Wilder himself admitted they offered him more money to fight that Anthony Joshua.
How many times do we got to go through this?
As many times as it takes to dispel the propaganda and revisionist version of history that John Fury is feeding the media. Contrary to his opinion, because that's what it is, an opinion, Deontay Wilder himself already admitted he was being pursued by Anthony Joshua, and he was offered more money to fight him than he made fighting your son. But he made his decision, and he has to live with it. You don't speak for Alexander Usyk.
Where do you get that he wouldn't fight Wilder?
Not that it matters, because it's not Deontay Wilder that he's after. He's after your son. He means to become an undisputed champion in this division the way he did in the previous one, cruiserweight. And your son has something that he wants, and what you want is for your son to make off like a bandit. Take the money and run.
The same applies to Dillian.
Yeah, Dillian pulled out of the Otto Wallin fight, but to fight who?
Your son.
And if your son has already faced the most dangerous heavyweight in the world 3 times, the way you say he's the most dangerous heavyweight in the world, then why should he lose any sleep over Dillian Whyte? Why not take care of that guy? Should be a walk in the park and you'll make more money.
They're about to order him to fight Dillian, and now he's contemplating retirement.
How convenient. It was Boxing Beats and Rhymes, one of my favorite channels here on YouTube, that said it best. The sport of boxing doesn't like shortcuts. The sport of boxing doesn't like guys that try to skip ahead of the queue, skip ahead in the line. If you want Tyson Fury to be thought of as those Lennox Lewis, Joe Louis,
About time he started acting like it.
he didn't have a reign after he beat Vladimir. He disappeared. And if he retires on the heels of his latest victory over the same guy that he beat last year for the WBC title, that doesn't count as a reign either, though the guys that people like to compare him to, they reigned as champions.
They didn't just bail.
And that is why people think of them in the light that they think of them, because they didn't take the easy way out.
Way Fury is if he retires.
Not saying he is going to retire. I don't know what he's going to do. I just know that if that's what he does, that's how that move will be viewed in several circles. Finally, a lot is being made the scorecards for this past weekend's super middleweight undisputed title fight, Caleb Plant versus Canelo Alvarez, for all the marbles. It appears that every single one of the three judges had Canelo Alvarez well ahead of Caleb Plant, in spite of what some naysayers thought during the fight. And during the fight, I was live right here on the channel, and I felt that Canelo Alvarez, in all likelihood, is ahead of Caleb by a considerable margin because Caleb is only fighting half a fight. The same way that Robson Conceição was only fighting half a fight. The same way that Guillermo Rigondeaux was only fighting half a fight. When the focus is mostly defense, one must remember, we're not gathered here today to simply watch you evade punches and block punches. We're here to see you beat that guy or to see that guy beat you.
Defense is a part of it.
But that's just one part of it. What about ring generalship? What's happening, why it's happening, and on whose terms? What about Caleb Plant giving up as much real estate as he did, being backed into those ropes? Since when is having your back on the ropes?
Since when does that mean you win in a fight?
If your back is on those ropes, I hope you're at least walking the guy backing you into those ropes into shots. I hope you're landing more often than he is, because if you're not,
Well,
you're losing. Bell sounds, guy starts giving up ground, giving up real estate, back on the ropes, being outlanded by the other guy who's throwing the heavier shots, the heavier leather, and you guys mean to tell me that you had Plant ahead? On what premise? On what basis? What was Plant doing to Canelo Alvarez to win more rounds than Canelo?
when did he back Canelo off?
When did he have Canelo Alvarez's back on the ropes, unloading heavy leather on him? Please explain it.
It doesn't really matter now because the fight is over.
Though this does speak to the scoring discrepancies we see weekend after weekend, where guys, they just don't seem to understand.
The guy's scoring the fight at home.
What you saw from Caleb on Saturday is what you saw from Guillermo Rigondeaux with John Riel Casimero. It's what you saw with Robson Conceição in the Valdez fight. Before that, it's what you saw with Erislandy Lara in the Canelo fight.
Defense alone won't win the fight.
Not by itself, and anybody claiming to have had Caleb Plant up during the fight needs to reevaluate what exactly it is they're paying attention to and what they're scoring, because Canelo Alvarez was so clearly landing more often than Caleb Plant.
Throwing more often, landing more often.
Caleb didn't match Canelo's output, and he never backed him off. He never had him on the ropes unloading.
He never discouraged him from coming forward.
He obviously never had him in trouble. So on what premise would Caleb Plant have been ahead of Canelo Alvarez? You tell me.